You've done this a few times now. This is album number 5. What do you think is the most important question to ask yourselves when you're making a record?
How do you make it different to the last one? And probably still retain something that made the people like the last one, but also probably fulfill whatever you're trying to do too. So keep and not the successful bits, but the bits that worked last time, but then adding something new to it. I think that's always a challenge when you're starting out to do it, I think.
I don't know. Stephen really takes the songs to us, and we help him get them to a position that we're all kind of happy, I suppose. And Steve likes writing 5 verses when one will do, so a lot of it's chopping stuff out. I'm only joking, but no, we kind of all collectively hone them a little bit. And yeah, Steve's right, probably keeping the essence of the old stuff embedded, but trying to get a natural progression, which I think does happen just with the more we're playing or writing new material, we're just progressing, I suppose. So,
in terms of figuring out the answer to that question, then what do you feel like were some of the key milestones working on this record that sort of felt like breakthrough moments, if you will?
Probably the first track we mixed was On and On, and I remember when we demoed it and we worked on it, putting the string parts down on a keyboard, and I don't know how to score strings and stuff, but I remember thinking, if we can get the sound that we've got in our kind of heads in a studio format, this is going to be pretty cool. So then getting a mix back, being the first mix back of working with the new producer, and being like, all right, okay, so we managed to do that. That's exciting. So that's well, that means the challenges on the other tracks, they should be doable too, because that was a big one to tackle, it's a big song with lots of arrangements on it, lots going on, and then we got that first mix back and we're like, yeah, there's not much we really need to tweak here, and it's getting that energy of the live take down as well, which is a big challenge, I think.
I think what we did differently for this album is we actually set up our practice room as a recording studio. So basically when we went into practice, we were actually just recording the songs, and then I had monitors behind me, so we would literally play even sections and play it, and then we would listen back to it. And when you listen back to stuff, you can learn a lot more a lot quicker. So you would just listen back to it and go, oh no, that bass line needs to change, or it's too fast, too slow, I should change this, or that section could be dropped, or maybe we need something else there. So I think that was a massive difference to this album to what we did in previous times, because normally that process I think takes a lot longer, because sometimes you're in the studio and you go, I should really change that, you should change that.
Yeah.
So we ironed out a lot of that stuff before we even got to the studio.
Yeah.
And it's definitely what we'll do in the future, is just record our practices effectively.
Yeah, our time in the studio was quite limited in that we were spending more money than we've spent before on that process, and to waste a day in there to work out an arrangement, couldn't really afford to do that. So that saved all that, I think. Yeah. And then Paul would normally, in his normal process, come up and spend some time in the rehearsal room in Aberdeen, but we committed to using him he had other projects and things, so as Scott says, sending him that stuff, he was kind of like he was in the practice room and was like, yeah, that's fine, or that, try it this way, and things like that. That was a big change, I think.
Working with Paul, which song changed the most under his influence, and which song changed the least?
So I think when we the bit that I always remember is when we tackled Ruminations, and we were playing Ruminations quite rocky and Oasis-y, had a bit of a swagger. It was and then that just naturally we're going to this rock kind of vibe,
pushing it, I think, too
and then
hard.
We played through it once, and as Paul does, he lets you play through it once, and you come back, go into the control room, and he says, well, what do you think about this song? And then he said, it reminds me of this, and he put on Bon Jovi, that song.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is he talking about? and then he played Black Keys, and he said, which one do you want it to sound like?
Yeah.
And we were like, Black Keys. And he was like, yeah, so play it like Black Keys then.
we were like telling him all the reference points were like Richard Swift and stuff and gospel, and the guy Barnett, the gospel guy that Kanye always samples and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I get all that. And then we were playing it like we were the Gallagher brothers.
Yeah.
And he's like, just sit back and do its thing and don't try and force it. And then that was like,
okay.
yeah. And it doesn't actually have that much on it.
No.
Like, it's quite a big sounding song, but it didn't need to have kitchen sink thrown at it. And that was quite a good realization as well. It's like, you can be a bit sparser with it, I think.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the balance was making this record between having something that has that live feel to it, like you're saying, you know, bands like the Black Keys, and having something that has a little bit more of a studio polish? What do you think that balance was on this record compared to previous ones?
I think we've been pretty guilty on other records of maybe ironing out too much and standing over the producer we had previously and going, that snare's a little bit late, pull it back, or that synth's a bit loud, pull it down. And the way Paul worked was, he's working in Glasgow on mixes, and I mixed some of it with him, but he's working on a big analog desk, and long story short, for him to tweak a song, he needs the feedback within an hour or he can't do the tweak. So he's like sending it, and it's basically like, unless anything's wildly sticking out to you that you think is going to really bug you till the day you die, think about, can you actually live with that? And the answer was usually like, yeah, it's fine. And that's the things that make a record interesting, is like, you know, you go back to OK Computer or something. I'm not saying we've made a record as good as OK Computer, but there's bits that still to this day are like, I've never noticed that little shaker on the right hand side before, or the tambourine and on is ridiculously loud, but it's really interesting sounding, so just leave it. And that's something we've never really done before, and I think his process didn't allow us to iron that out.
Yeah, well,
which was good.
His process is probably slightly different to normal recording processes we've been in, where you would play it in and then edit it, or muck about with it and add like effects or whatever. Whereas his process is, no, get the sound and record it, and then when I come to mix it, I don't have to do anything. I just turn it up or down. And that was like a total change for us. But so he actually spent more time honing the right sound, but then he's committed to it, and then that's it. You don't change it. So it's, yeah, that was good. And in
energy.
That,
it probably gave it more energy, and I think it did, yeah.
It's interesting, we've spoken a lot about the album from a musical point of view, but from a lyrical point of view too, it feels like that you're writing more matter-of-factly and perhaps more raw and honestly than you have ever before. What do you think was fueling that, or where do you sort of sit on that statement, I suppose?
I mean, I think like the last while has been like, well, I don't really have anything to lose really, so be a bit more honest. And like, there's definitely a couple of songs that I could maybe roll this back a bit, or like try and hide behind things a little bit, but like, I mean, I don't know, there's a big thing about like mental health now with a lot of people, and I think men as well don't really speak about when they're struggling a bit, and I think there's been times where it's been like, well, this is a tricky thing for me, but I can't be the only person in the world that's gone through this. So if I sing about it, and even two of our audience come up and go, oh, that really helped me in some way, and like, music's a bit of a blanket for you, whether you're up nor down. So I think, like, I had a guy come up to me in Edinburgh and was like, he couldn't really tell me about it, but he was like, oh, the album's really clicked for various reasons for the last couple of months, and was very thankful for it. And I was like, well, that's kind of why you do that. But yeah, there was a couple of on and on songs about a particularly bleak situation, and then the People Need Loved Ones quite raw as well, and it's like, well, you could kind of tone that down a bit, but actually you want it to connect with people, so just leave it and hopefully it's okay. Although it backfired a bit because I didn't really think it was about having to talk about it so much, but actually it's got easier, so it's not so bad, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously Stephen wrote all these songs pre-pandemic, but I think there's quite a lot of sentiment that's come out of the pandemic that kind of maybe like hits home with the people a bit more, maybe lands a bit better with people because they maybe experienced a lot more troubling times over the time it kind of was being sat there.
It's been a pretty weird 3 years for everyone, really.
So I think, it's interesting that you actually wrote it all pre-pandemic, but it actually worked in how most people, I think, probably feel a lot of what's happening in the record. So it's good.
I know you finished the album pretty much 2 years ago now. It was done kind of towards the end of 2019, and you went back in and did a few tweaks at the end of 2022. How's your relationship now at the end of 22 different to your relationship when you first finished the album at the end of 2020? How's that changed over those 2 years?
I think the most weird thing for me was the day it came out and the singles had been out, the first 3 songs had been out. So it was like they're songs that were relatively, you know, poppy and shared. And then the minute I saw people sharing things like On and On or the People Need Love song and stuff, I was like, okay, this isn't really, it's not just something on our phones now. That like my kids listen to it in the car. They're like little and they're like, put on Daddy's band and put it on. They're the only people that had really heard it in my world. And then it was like, all right, everyone's got it now. It's in their pockets. And that was a weird feeling. It was like, it's not that thing that's been a bit shared between us. It's like, it's out now. And that was quite strange because, but then playing it live changes the context as well, because then you start to find out which ones everyone's really into and which ones are favourites. And then you're like, well, I didn't think that was the best song on the record, but that's the one everyone's responding to or whatever. And
it takes on a different life once it's sat in your pocket, as you say, for however long. And in this case, 3 years or 2 and a bit years before it was even produced and manufactured or whatever. So it's like, and then it takes on a different life when people start hearing it, and then, as you say, when you play it live. So it's interesting.
You mentioned your kids there too, Stephen. I know that everyone in the band is now a dad. How's fatherhood changed your relationship to music and what you do as a band?
I mean, I think it's, well, we're all knackered, but also I think, like, I said it a little bit in another chat this week that I think that these trips are meaning a lot more now. Like, we've got 2 more gigs left in this particular run, and everyone's missing, you know, by now this point everyone's missing home a little bit and missing the kids and missing, you know, and we joke about like, oh, it's great to get some solo time because you can go record shopping and you go for a coffee and you're not on duty, but like it does, for me it makes the trip mean a lot more because you've sacrificed something to do it, and I think for that reason you've got to give it your all. And I think when we were a bit younger, and not even really this lineup's always been pretty professional, but we recorded once in a studio in Glasgow with a really good guy about 15 years ago, and we just got hammered and, you know,
mucked about.
The guy was a keyboard player for the Blue Nile, and I'm like 25, and I'm like, cool, do you want to go for a pint? It's like, just those experiences are like, they're quite a privilege to do what we do, I think. And the fact we played in Glasgow last night and there was like 150 folk there into it and have paid money in a financial crisis to come and see it. It's like, you don't want to take that for granted. And I think probably the maturity of becoming a parent, it makes everything come into a different focus in life, let alone music, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely gets softer and more, I may be romanticising it a bit, but for me it's like you become a lot more emotionally invested in stuff because it has to mean a bit more, I think. But I mean, your wee one's a wee bit younger and my 2 are a wee bit older, and it's pretty cool going back and like talking about the band to them, and like your wee one's got a drum kit already, and my kids are like, my kids will do gigs. Like if I say I've got a gig and they see a guitar in the hallway, they do gigs, and it's like, that is, you know, the more I talk about music, the more they do, so that's a really nice thing to go back to as well.
What was the first album you played your kids? Or the first song, if you can remember?
Martha's obsessed with Fleetwood Mac, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that, but she used to literally fall asleep to, I'd load up Spotify and it would be like Dreams, what was next? Go Your Own Way or something, then like Landslide, and then we knew like how long it would take to get her down by like which song you were on the best of Fleetwood Mac basically. So she really liked Dreams though. You could get her to fall asleep in like 30 seconds listening to Dreams.
My eldest is obsessed with, in terms of vinyl, he's based on value. So he'll pull, this one's got 3 in it. There's like a chic box set. He loves Arcade Fire records, are always doublers. And I haven't explained to him the issues with Arcade Fire that are now going on with the singer. But he loves Reflector and the other one, probably because it's got cool artwork and it's shiny and whatever. But he's quite good at like picking good stuff out. But Arthur's song was She's Leaving Home was the Beatles' Sleep song, so that reminds me of him. But I'm trying to get them into they're quite good at like picking vinyls out and stuff, and they're not destroying them anymore as they were. But yeah, the current one is Harry Styles. That's the hit for everyone really, and us as well. I like it as well.
Biggest lesson you learned making the album?
Well, personally, Paul probably pushed me a little bit more than I've ever been pushed, just to like do things slightly differently, and maybe stuff that I wouldn't normally play. And it's not like not that I didn't think I should do it. It's more,
drummer
yeah.
as well.
He was like, no, just stick in a fill there, or stick in a bit of something there. Okay, can I do that? And it's like, yeah, go for it. And then like Right to Be Here is really fast on like one hand on the hi-hat, and it sounds better played with one hand. But I was like, can I just play it like this because it's easier? Like, no, you need to play it that. I was like, okay, I'll get comfy on that. Did it. And then he went, right, I think we should knock it up 4 BPM. I'm like, Jesus, are you serious? I was like, so then I had to I was like, give me like 10 minutes, I'll need to practice this. And then, so I just like practiced for 10 minutes until and it's still, I'll be honest, I'm not happy with how it came out. It's on the edge, but that's fine, that's probably what makes it good. But yeah, so he pushed me to do things like, just simple things. You'd be like, I want in that song, you'd be like, I want the chorus to be do-doon, do-ga, whilst you're doing a fast hi-hat, and it was tricky, but it works. So that was good for me. And
I think
he pushed all of us actually,
yeah,
in ways. He was like, no, do that.
I learned a bit more about not worrying about the tuning of the vocals, which sounds counterproductive, but not just singing it perfectly, but actually just singing it in the way that he was really good at. Like, this song's about you being really annoyed about this situation, but you don't sound very annoyed. You need to kind of remember what you were thinking when you wrote it. And like, he would do like 3 takes and just to get me going, and then he would be like, yeah, that sounds a bit more passionate or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, I think I was a wee bit out in the second verse, and he's like, well, we'll listen to that, but don't worry about it. Yeah. And that's something that I think in the past it was always like concentrating on getting the perfect take or something, and it's like, that doesn't really matter. It's more about, if you do these classic album shows and they isolate the vocals, they're always way off all over the shop, but the recording's got energy or whatever, and
the attitude and the feel is there.
That's more important.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning curve, I think.
Thanks very much, guys.
No worries. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Nice one.